Hey everyone, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or wherever you are. We are happy to welcome you to chat with Sandy and Karen. I'm Karen Jackson, and my co-host is,
Sandy Bansel.
and we welcome Sandy. Good to see you. Uh, we have a very special guest. We have one of our own today, but well esteemed, and he's much more experienced in podcasting than we are. So we are so excited to welcome Alfonso Mendoza. He is going to talk about podcasting, and who knows? We have an agenda, but as you know, we write the agenda and then talk nothing about it. So all the links will be included in the show notes, and if you're watching live with us, then feel free to chat or say hey or tell us where you're from, and call your friends, tell them to, or text your friends and tell them to come on and ask us some questions. So welcome, Fonz. How are you doing today?
Hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm excited. I'm very caffeinated right now. I just prepped some of my favorite coffees, so I am ready to go. It's my brain juice. But again, thankful for you ladies and thankful for this invite to be here. As I was mentioning earlier, it's often that I don't get to be on the other side and getting asked the question. So I'm just really excited to be here and be part of your show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Alfonso. Oh, would you prefer Alfonso or Fonz?
Uh, whichever you. Oh, we could just stay. Let's go with Fonz.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fonz, tell us, how did you get into podcasting?
Okay. Well, that's a great question. This all happened April 10th of 2020. That's when the first episode aired, and it all started just because during that time, obviously, it was everything had shut down. And so it was a time where everybody was doing PD, virtual PD. And so as I participated in some of the virtual PD, became familiar with some of the platforms, then I said, I can do this as, something maybe not necessarily geared into just demonstrating PD, but actually trying to find educators to just be one on one, have those conversations, hear what is happening, in their part of the world. Because I had educators from here in our local area in South Texas. And then, of course, that branched out to educators now globally. And so it all started with that intention of having people see things through a different lens as far as what was happening, and also to kind of let educators know that whatever it is that they're going through, whatever it is that they're feeling, they're seeing, they're hearing, that they're not alone in this. Because oftentimes, as educators, we work in silos. And I think the what has happened now, and us being more connected and becoming connected educators, we're able to see that some of the same struggles that we may be going through are the same struggles that our colleagues, across the world are going through, and the same, and just in a different setting. So I think that kind of provides a little bit of that reassurance that although sometimes we may feel like, oh man, this is just me, maybe I'm not doing things right, maybe this is happening, though you can find somebody that you can relate to, whether it's locally in your area, statewide, nationally, but now even globally. So it now organically kind of morphed more into, I just want to hear your stories. I think oftentimes it's like I give PD a lot at work, and work on trainings, but sometimes during that time you don't have enough time to really get to know your audience, your teachers, and so on, and build that relationship. So with this now, it kind of morphed into, tell me your story.
Mm.
Tell us how you got into education, because everybody got into education in a different way. Some, like myself, I always vowed to never be in education, but fell into it and fell in love with it. And
Mm.
now it's just, share your story. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us your passion. What is your passion project? And it's been a wonderful experience for myself, and getting to know wonderful educators that we oftentimes see on Twitter that we're like, oh my goodness, they're just so they're edu famous, they're Twitter famous, they're this and that. And then when they come on the show, they are people just like you and I who've had to improvise, adapt, and overcome throughout their career. And it's great that you can relate to them and you
Mm.
get to know them as a person. So again, I know that was a long answer, but it started off with that, but now it's turned into just hearing people's stories.
Brilliant. So, what did you want to become then? If it wasn't a teacher,
Oh,
what were your
that
dreams?
yeah.
Or
So my dreams were to be rich and be rich quick. So actually, I was actually following Dr. Karen's footsteps now because congratulations on Dr. Karen who has just finished her master's in business administration.
Yeah.
So cheers to you because
Yes.
I have
Thank you.
a degree in business administration. So
Yeah.
what I did is I went into business because as a high school student growing up and kind of making the decision of okay, what is it that I want to be when I grow up? I said, well, I would look at my teachers and I was like, I don't want to be a teacher. And at that time, a lot of friends were, yeah, I'm gonna go into the College of Education and be a
mm,
teacher and so on. I was like, why? It's like, why do you want to do that? I was like, don't you just want to go and make money and all of that? So that was my goal. My goal is I went in, just blazing into the college setting, excited, taking my business courses, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna make it. I'm learning my accounting, my marketing, and all that good stuff. And as soon as I got out and graduated, well, actually, let me go back just a little bit. That year that I'm graduating, one of my professors, it was the last class. I'll never forget him. His name's Dr. Thompson, and that was the last marketing course that I had. And this is what he said, and it really it still resonates to this day. He said, hey, all right, many of you are getting ready to graduate. He goes, I just got to tell you one thing. Once you get out of here and you graduate, I want you to know that everything that you learned in these 4 years is already obsolete. So anything that you learned
mm,
now, forget it. It's done. It's over with. And I also want to let you know that that piece of paper, and in this case, I've got these, he goes, that piece of paper, all it really means is that you're trainable.
Mm.
So that has always resonated with me in the fact that, okay, I get it. It really stuck with me, and not in a bad way. It stuck with me in like, you know what? It means that you have a certain set of skills that in any situation you would be able to improvise, adapt, and overcome. So graduated, got into business. My for about 2 years, I was working for a company and I learned, money management. I did the marketing. Customer service was huge,
mm.
and that is the one thing that I am so excited and thankful for. That I learned so much about customer service and knowing and meeting the needs of my customers in this particular company, which I won't mention names because but uh, then all of a sudden life takes a pivot, and life things happen. At the time my dad was dealing with just a condition, serious condition. He's fine now. We overcame that, and thank God. But it kind of made me change gears and said, okay, I need to find a job where I am more available to my parents in case of emergencies, in case they need my assistance, my help, because being an only child, it's all on me.
Yeah. Wow.
So I had to make that pivot, and a friend of mine calls me and says, hey, there's this school, district that they're hiring, and they're looking for math teachers, and you have a lot of experience in math doing business calculus, business algebra, your finance and everything. So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So picked up the phone, called the school, spoke to the assistant principal, and he said, yeah, come on in for an interview, like right away. He's like, come in tomorrow. So I went in for an interview, and the interview lasted about 10 minutes because um, he ended up being a teacher at my former high school. or
Yeah.
actually the husband of a teacher at my former high school. He was the former baseball coach there. Went in, he knew who I was because I had his wife for my BCIS class, for my business course. And it was about 10 minutes. He said, "Come back tomorrow, fill out your paperwork." And that's it. I fell into teaching and I loved it. I
Mm.
loved it, not knowing anything about pedagogy, not knowing having any formal training, nothing. It was pretty much, we need a math teacher. And at that time, they're like, here are two binders. And in those binders are transparencies. They're like, here are your binders and go. And I'm like, okay. And at that time, we used the overhead projectors. So, at the end of the day, you come out with your hand all with different colors. It's purple, it's red, and everything. But I always come back to what Dr. Thompson said. The paper that you have means that you are trainable. So, and also, of course, the skill set that I built in this company, mainly the customer service piece, is what I think has helped me be very successful and has allowed me the opportunities that I have had, because it really, truly, honestly starts with relationships. It starts with
Mm.
knowing your customers. So I often joke with other guests and say, I was I was doing personalized learning before it even became a thing or a buzzword, because back in 2006, that's the way that I modeled my classroom. But because of the business skills that I learned, and then little by little, I met some amazing educators that I would go and observe and get to learn the way that they would engage the students in the lessons. And so it was a learning process. And I think that being an avid learner always and wanting to learn continually really helped me in that aspect too. That if I was stuck with something, or maybe I didn't know how to explain something correctly or use the correct pedagogical practice or anything like that, I would simply go and ask another
Mhm.
teacher. I would go and observe another teacher. And then I always just put it in my little mixing bowl, mix it up, personalize it to what worked for me and what would work for my students. And we had fun with it, and it was
Mm.
great. So, yeah, that's the way I fell into teaching. And as you can tell, I have a passion for education. I love it.
Fonz, you mentioned something about the connection between business and education. And I've always thought, as well as customer service, like you mentioned, that um, program management is a skill that all teachers need. But you don't call it program management. You do in the business world, but planning time or something like that is maybe what we is an equivalent. But I just really, I would love to see more connection between the skills and uh, the things that you learn in business and the things that you learn as a teacher.
And or Karen, I'm sorry. I've had that conversation with many educators and many colleagues, because one thing that I do notice here in my area, in the Rio Grande Valley, is that there are a lot of business professionals that come into teaching, whether it's the business courses, or some of them, there's some marketing courses, but some of them actually go into the classroom. And uh, again, this is just from my personal experience, but I have seen where these teachers that come in from industry do a little better in many ways. In some ways, we may be lacking, like I told you, like I'm lacking a lot of that training and theory that you learned in the College of Education, because I didn't go through that. But I have seen, members, colleagues that come in from industry that outlast many that go through the standard College of Education. And I don't know if that goes back to that customer service component of
Mm.
really diving in and knowing your customers. And of course there's other variables there, but I agree with you. I think that there are some colleges that I have heard, and I'm going to have to look back at my notes, but they require the teachers before they graduate, they have to take some form of business courses, and whether, but dealing with some kind of customer service. And it does tie in. I honestly am a firm believer that business and education do tie in. And as you notice now, even a lot of educators now that are becoming edupreneurs and doing that, I think that maybe there might be a time to kind of look at education a little different too, as well as, having teachers go through maybe a marketing course, or, you learning about customer service, but learning a little bit about business, because that really does tie into the classroom. And so that's very interesting that you do bring that up. But like I said, all my success that I have had until now, I really do attribute a lot of it to going through the College of Business and helping me in this transition.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the experiences we do bring in our classroom, they are our customers. I don't know if you say it in the US, but it's certainly in the UK. And I think maybe I've heard it around here as well in Europe. Bums on seats. We need more bums on seats. And then when you do open house, you're the salesperson. So you're not that teacher. You have to market your school, your course, because you want to attract more students. So yeah, I was never business minded. I still don't think I'm business minded, but I've learned that through work.
And I agree with you 100%, because meet the teacher night, open house, anytime you're meeting parents, you're really, if you think about it, these parents on at the beginning of the year, they're trusting their child with you. I mean, they know that you're there because, I mean, you're a teacher, you're an educator, you are certified, you are qualified, and so on. But you really do have to sell yourself to the parents as well, because I believe that oftentimes the learning community, or the term learning community, often excludes parents. And they say, when you hear the word term learning community, oftentimes it's, your teachers, your administrators, your students, but oftentimes the most important piece is left out, which is the parent. And I have always been a believer that if you include the parents in the very beginning in everything and all things that you do in the classroom, that helps your classroom community, your atmosphere in your classroom run a little bit smoother, because the students know that you have open communication with the parents. The parents can safely come to you and feel, that psychological safety of, as a parent, I can go talk to my teacher and maybe have that crucial conversation of, why is my child not doing very well? What can I do at home? And as a teacher, I mean, we wear many hats as an educator. And I think one of those hats is a little bit of that salesman hat, where you have to, really reach out to the parents, build that community. And then, of course, within your classroom, you have to sell yourself to the students. And one thing that I've learned right away is that if your students are really good at reading you more than you think, and they're a lot brighter and smarter and more, kind of, they can pick up on things right away. And if you're not open and honest with them, if you're not straightforward with them right from the get-go, and maybe you start off with this persona that maybe you're trying to be, they can read right through that. And so the best thing to do is always just be open, honest, mutual respect for one another, and you start building that community. And it's amazing how much fun you can have in your classroom, because man, my years of teaching were so much fun. There isn't one year that I never woke up and said, I don't want to go to work. I mean, work is so much fun. And as opposed to my business job, towards the tail end, it was like, "Ugh, I don't want to wake up." But here in education, oh my goodness, it's an adventure every single day.
Yeah.
And for me, it's you're learning something new every day. And most importantly, sometimes it's like you're learning some of the cool stuff from your students, and that is really cool as well. So yeah, you really do have to sell yourself.
Yes. Yes. And you're also selling the curriculum too, you know,
Yes.
because when the kids get fall in love with your subject area, they're gonna spend a couple hours on YouTube videos watching the whatever your content is. They're gonna be so excited
Mhm.
because they want to teach themselves.
Yeah, and
And
you know that that's something that is that you mentioned. I'm glad you said that because I think with the curriculum, there are there are teachers that see the curriculum and they kind of see it as like per se a gospel per se. It's like, well, this is what's written and this is what I need to cover by this day, this day, this day, this day, and this is all that needs to be done. And but the curriculum serves as a guide. It's a
Mm,
guide. It's not gospel. You know, it's not meant to be set in stone that you have to go through everything, and
right.
meticulously, because there are ways as an educator that you can get creative, where you can say, okay, if I'm on this unit, oh wow, wait a minute, I can blend something from the following unit in here that's going to help me lead into that. And that is where teachers can use that creative juice, that and exercise their creative muscles. They can be very creative in implementing several tools that can come together, where maybe you're even doing two units concurrently, but the students don't know any better because the students are engaged. They're like you said, they have that buy-in. They see how thrilled you are, and students do feed off of the
Yeah.
teacher. Whatever energy you bring in, you're pretty much setting the tone for that day. So if you as a teacher are really passionate about what you're going to be teaching, and you have your lesson set up, and granted, sometimes the tech won't work, maybe it won't
mm,
go the way that you think, but don't let that discourage you. And that's one of the things that I always found. My three words that I mentioned in the show notes that people will see have always been improvise, adapt, and overcome. How often do lessons not go the way you want them to? All
Yeah.
the
all the
time,
time.
more often than not.
Yeah.
But that's where our improvisational skills come in and say, okay, it didn't work this way. So you can either do one of two things. If you're quick on the fly, just say, okay, no worries, we'll take it around, we'll take it this way. Or the second thing is, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, and say, hey, you know what? It didn't quite work the way I wanted it to. So let's just take a pause here and maybe we can revisit this tomorrow. And there's nothing wrong with letting your students know and say, hey, you know what? This isn't the way I had it planned and it didn't work out. We'll
Mhm.
revisit tomorrow. We'll come back to it and then you can prep. Oftentimes it's like, oh, you don't
Yeah.
want to let the students know that, oh my gosh, I failed and the lesson didn't go the way it did. But you're sharing a wonderful lesson with them that even as an adult, although you feel that many times you have things, you've got it together, something may happen. Well, what are you going to do about it? Some people can improvise on the fly. Others that are more, I guess go into deeper thought and maybe like to plan things out, just say, you know what, let's revisit. We'll come back and things will get better. And then you
Mm,
learn from what happened. But what I loved about this is that showing your vulnerability and sharing that with your students is also a very important lesson for them, because they get to see that, it things may not always go the way they want it to go, and that it's okay to be vulnerable and it feels uncomfortable, but it's a good lesson in saying, hey, you know what, well, let's see what we can do. And maybe oftentimes it was my students that would be, hey, Mr. M, because they call me Mr. M, they're like, Mr. M, don't worry, check this out, we can do it this way. And so then I'm learning from them,
mm,
and it gets really exciting because now you're learning from one another, and they get so excited and they buy into you. They buy into you being honest. They buy into you seeing like, hey,
Yeah.
he's
Yes.
or she is a normal teacher. But they going with the flow and we're learning together. And it really builds its sense of community. And that's one thing that I absolutely loved about the classroom as well.
yeah, brilliant. Uh, I
Go
thought
ahead.
Karen.
No, yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to jump over. Um, so, yeah, I mean, you said so much about relationship and also letting the authenticity, letting your students see the real you, and that things don't always work out the way you plan. Um, it's so important for teachers. I think that's the thing that we're so passionate in college that those of us who went through education, we want to be the best teacher, and we want all our students to succeed, and we want them all to be engaged. And we're taking these theory classes, and we know how the brain works, and we know how students learn. But after we graduate, it's a lot more than that. And you know, you, I feel very sorry for my first year students. Uh, I, I believe, I hope, I pray that I got to be a better teacher as the years went by, because you make so many mistakes. At least I did. I made a lot of mistakes and did the wrong thing. That yeah, kind of glad time helped.
Mhm. Yeah, and I agree with you on that. Like going into think about it. I mean, I didn't go into the College of Education. Then all they said is like, okay, you're certified to be a math teacher. I mean, you have enough college hours in math that you can do that. And then of course, I had to do my teacher certification, and they just gave me the binder and they're like, go. And I was like, okay. So it was just teaching algebra, and and like you said, Karen, is I was going in teaching algebra the way that I was taught the algebra. And I think oftentimes, and
Yeah,
being a math teacher for years, is oftentimes as teachers, we revert back to our comfort zone. So it's like muscle
yeah,
memory. And so, for example, for through grade school, if you learn using standard algorithm, and you go through grade school, you go through junior high and high school just doing standard algorithm, guess what? I mean, chances are is if you become a math teacher, and although you may go through, and I mean, and not just a math teacher, but I'm saying also, if you go through any college or any track, I should say, anytime that you're going to be doing math, you're probably going to revert back to your comfort zone, and you're going to go back to that standard algorithm. So it's kind of that fight or flight kind of deal. Like you come into the classroom and you're like, yeah, all right. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, things aren't kind of going the way they should, or maybe the way they want me to do the math is a little different than what I learned in the College of Education or with what I know. But as a teacher, because you feel like, oh my goodness, the lesson has to go on, you're going to revert back to that muscle memory, and you're going to go back to that standard algorithm. Now, one thing that I learned as a math teacher for many years is that I was teaching oftentimes with the standard algorithm, and I was avoiding manipulatives. And the reason that I was avoiding manipulatives was because I didn't know how to use them. But now, as the years progressed, in the later part of my years, I learned a little bit more how manipulatives became a little bit more effective, and my students were doing a little bit better. And so now, one of the things that I told my content specialist, the math content specialist there that I work with, I said, Mr. P, Mr. Palomine, if I would have known what you're teaching now, the way that you're teaching the math and modeling with the concrete, the pictorial, the abstract, and using base 10 blocks, I would have been a better math teacher. And I even told them just kind of the same feeling that you just said right now. I was like, I feel like I did a disservice to my students, because I mean, not that there's anything wrong with the standard algorithm, but with the manipulatives, they would actually understand the math. They would have the number sense and know why 2 times 2 is 4, and not just see it as a math fact of something that they memorize, but they would actually visually see, they would touch, they would be able to understand those concepts. And so sometimes now I'm like, man, I hope those kids are doing well, and they're doing good, because you feel those things. But
yeah,
I think that's all part of the growing too as well. And in us also, it really helps us as educators that are passionate to even continue to grow, that even though we've done things a certain way, hey, let's get out of our comfort zone and let's maybe learn it a different way and teach it a different way to see what the results are. And oftentimes it could be very refreshing to do
Mhm.
things differently, because I think somebody, there was a guest that said, you've been teaching for 20 years, or have you been teaching the same lesson for 20 years? And I was like, ooh, wow, like that's going to hurt,
Mm.
So it's some of those things where continually it's important to seek that growth mindset, look at our practice. And there's nothing wrong with being a little critical of ourselves and say, hey, you know what? This didn't work out this way. What could I do different? There's nothing wrong with asking for help, because that's part of the learning process. And although we may not want to seem very vulnerable, or we may not want to feel, like we're inadequate, it we feel those things all the time with other things that are personal. But this is something that's professional, that is, you're having that immediate contact with teachers, that immediate contact with students. And in the end, the students are going to benefit from your growth.
Right.
They're going to benefit from you getting out of that comfort zone. And it you could do that one thing that they're going to remember forever, and they're going to say, wow, I learned this from this teacher. So I'm going to just add to that real quick on the importance of that. There was a substitute teacher that when I was in high school, he would always come in. He was a retired science teacher. His name was Mr. Rodriguez. He passed away several years ago. But as a substitute teacher, he would come into our science class. And here's what I loved about him. Number one, teacher would leave the lesson plans, and he's like, whatever, let's go ahead and I'm going to teach you these things. But he's a science teacher, so he knew, what we needed to know, but he made it so engaging, so fun. I mean, we were always happy when we would see him. And I'll never forget, and to this day I have never forgotten, one day on the board he wrote C. Hopkins Cafe. And we're like, what? He goes, that's your lesson for today. C. Hopkins Cafe. Remember that, because that's all you will ever need for science, and it's going to
Mm.
tie into everything. And so what it was an acronym like C. Hopkins Cafe. It's the seven elements from the periodic table that we are all made up of, or that we all need to live. So it was, of course, the C. Hopkins Cafe. You've got, I forgot them now, but I mean, but I'll never forget C. Hopkins. So if I look at them, but it's like, for example, like carbon or carbon, helium, oxygen, phosphorus, sodium, iodine, nitrogen, and I think the S was sodium. I missed the K. I missed one of those
Calcium?
there. Oxygen,
Calcium?
yeah, calcium, and so
Potassium?
on. Potassium. There we go. But see, like that still stuck with me, and that was back when I was
That's
in
cool.
ninth grade biology.
So
Ninth
that's
grade
right.
biology. Well, you know what? That gentleman, many years ago, I think it was maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I ran into him, and uh, pardon me if I get a little emotional on this, because this story really means a lot. I ran into him. Um, I think it was at a doctor's office that I was there waiting, and I saw him, and I see him get up, and he's going to go to the water fountain. So I go up to the water fountain, and I said, Mr. Rodriguez, and he turned around, and I said, hi. I said, you probably don't remember me. He goes, no, no, like I don't remember. And he started talking, and his kind of like eyes were tearing up, because I guess he felt a little frustrated. He goes, I don't remember much anymore. And,
Wow.
and I told him, well, I just want to tell you something. I said, when I was in ninth grade biology, you would come into our teacher's class, and you taught us C. Hopkins Cafe. And I have never, ever, ever forgotten that from the moment that you shared that with me. His eyes teared up. His eyes teared up. And it was that special moment that I always told myself, when I became a teacher, I told myself, I'm not going to see the fruit of my labor till many years from now. Because right now, as a teacher, we're planting those seeds.
Mm.
And as a teacher, it's great when we get that immediate response and that immediate feedback of saying, okay, we're doing something well. And that's great, the immediacy of that. but you have to think about that the seed that you're planting is going to give fruit in the years to come. And hopefully one of these days, when I'm already old and into my 60s and so on, maybe one of my former students will remember and say, hey, Mr. Mendoza, I remember you teaching me this in elementary. I remember you teaching me this in high school. I may or may not see it, but I know that what I plant, what I sow, you know, it'll be rewarding. And I think that for me, that is the when I reframed, instead of it's about money, because it's not. As educators, I mean, we don't make, I'm not making business money,
Mm-mm.
but it's the investment that I'm making in people that pays off the most. And so, like I said, being a teacher is and an educator is something that is probably one of the best professions. And it's something that I fell in love with. And I think that it was something that I was meant to be, even though I never wanted to be. But I am so glad that I decided to follow that pivot. And 15 years later, here I am, still in education and still educating myself. I just completed my first year in the doctoral program. I've got 3 more
Mm,
years to go,
Awesome.
and I'm just so excited about my passion for education.
Yes.
fantastic. So, so you mentioned how long you've been in education, and you've mentioned transparencies. I think between the three of us, we can talk about transparencies. So, this is now you're going to tell us how creative you've been from the transparencies.
Yeah, so creatively, it was the classroom was like my canvas. And what I loved about it is just being that creative aspect, the creativity that came from, like I mentioned, I know, you know, curriculum comes and I'm like, let's do it this way. And just creatively trying to mesh as many components as possible with students and making those lessons engaging. And it's an art form. It really is. So teachers, you are by far, or us as educators are by far some of the most creative people. That comes, very naturally. And we may not see ourselves as creative because I just had a podcast with the amazing Shannon Moore, and we talked about creativity, because oftentimes that word has a connotation of I have to know how to draw or I have to know
Mm,
how to paint.
Yeah.
But educators are creative in the way that they're able to share a lesson many times with very few resources, depending on the district, and you make it work. uh, Taking the little that you have and creating just a wonderful atmosphere. You have to be very creative. And so creativity is something that I want teachers to continue to pursue, that creative component of their classes. Because one of the things I had a conversation also with another previous guest. We talked about how students as well need that creative process. And here in Texas, state testing starts at third grade. And when we were talking about this conversation, we kind of thought, like, wow, from about third grade on, students no longer have that creative freedom, in a sense, because it's all about A, B, C, or D, and just underlining the question, circling
mm,
information. So the only creativity they really get to do is learning acronyms and learning how to circle on tests to get the right answer. So those are the only doodles that they get. But I'm a big proponent of teachers, if they can go ahead and get out of their comfort zone and learn how to be creative. And even it doesn't necessarily have to be with something with education, it could be something on their own, like, either drawing, creating, building, finding a hobby where they have a creative outlet, but somehow translating that into the classroom and then allowing the students to learn as well, because we're teaching to a standardized test, but our students aren't standardized. They're
Yeah.
multimodal learners,
mm.
and you're
Right.
providing a unimodal test. There's no way. So but we need that creative component, because what happens is as they continue to grow and they just grow up with ABCDE, ABCDE, when they get into the real world and they get a real world problem or situation, it's like, well, where's answer choice
Yes.
A? you know, and
Mm.
and they don't they need really explicit instruction as to how to do things, instead of, okay, well, let me see, if I've got this and I've got this, what can I do with these two things, and do the problem solving.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of things there that I'm hoping to work through. And so I created this series called One Creation a Day. And it was something that I was inspired by, like Georgina Dean, Shannon Moore, Claudio Zavala, Al Thomas. I'm name dropping just a lot of people here that have been um, a very important part of my creative process. And so what I started, I set a mission for myself. The year 2021, my one word was to create. And just recently, I put up, I think it was day 35 now. I have done 35 days of one creation a day, where I'll learn a new skill, something that I've never known how to do, but I'll look up a YouTube video. I'll learn how to do that particular skill, and then I put my own personal spin on it and learn it, and then I'll upload it. So it could be anything from Adobe, like Photoshop, Illustrator, all of that. I've also created some apps using some platforms. I've created music beats. I've created some AR, VR tutorials. So what I want to do is I want to show educators and show everybody that creativity is not just about having a canvas and watercolors or having a sketch pad and paper. Creativity can be something digital, learning a new skill. Creativity can be creating an app. Creativity can be lesson design. Creativity can be creating a beat on the computer using free software, and with the hopes of inspiring them to exercise their creative muscles, and that hopefully translating into the classroom as well, and then putting maybe some of these tools into the hands of students where they can now be content creators, because this is the way that future of work is. I mean, we live like in an economy, it's like a gig economy, many times, where it's like, let me see what I can find here and there. And if we're preparing our students with digital media skills, media platforms, as they continue to grow, they have a skill set that for us has taken years to grow into. And for them, they'll get it at such an early age that as they move on, they learn the create or how to be creative with these platforms, other platforms. And as I transition from year to year and new things come, they aren't scared of it. They're very familiar with the tech and they'll be ready to go. And so that's what I'm hoping to do. I mean, I'm going to see how long I can go through with this, but my goal is to at least do 100 straight days. And what I do tell people is I don't pre record anything, I don't have anything ready the day before to just upload. I mean, everything is that day. I set an hour a day to
Wow.
learn something new for myself as a skill, share it with the world in hopes of inspiring them. And then that helps me just to continually learn and just continually, help the brain grow too as well. Stay active.
No, it's amazing. I went through, I was not stalking you. I went through and looked at some of the creativity you were doing. It's great. So do you
Yeah.
prefer AR or VR or both?
I'm an avid fan of AR VR. Anything that
Mm.
deals with immersive technology, I am a huge fan of and proponent. And that is one of my passions to speak about and to share. Because it's something that I really feel can be very engaging. To our students. And uh, oftentimes, just the gatekeepers would be administrators and teachers, but maybe more so administrators. But what happens is a lot of companies come in with these amazing platforms. And we were having this conversation. I said, the companies have the smarts for the tech, but they don't have yet that component of how to actually talk to school districts.
Mhm.
And so I've talked to a couple of companies and said, look, if you ever want to be successful in education, you can have a great product, but if you don't have somebody on your team that is either a former teacher, maybe a former administrator, or somebody that can talk teacher,
Teacher
you're going to
lingo.
have, yeah, teacher lingo, you're going to have a hard time implementing your tool into a district. If you don't have
Mm,
anything in a curriculum, you're not going to be able to get into a district. Yeah, I mean, if you mention the word teaks and you're in Texas, they're going to stop and listen. They'll listen, but you have
Mhm.
to make sure that you're following their teaks and you're aligned and everything. So there are many great tools that are out there, but it's just a matter of really uh, formulating the curriculum and saying, hey, this is what we offer. This is not just a gimmick,
mm,
because you know, AR
True.
VR is, it's not a gimmick. It's a tool and it's here, and we're using it a lot more than we really think we are, but we're not seeing the education aspect of it.
mm,
And for
Yeah.
me right now, I mean, this is the tech that can take your lessons. And we were talking about learning with multiple modalities. I mean, you've got your auditory, you've got your kinesthetic, you've got your visual, you've got that, you know, everything, because you're either holding on to something like this, you know, like a merge cube, you've got something here. And when we did our AR VR chat, I said, you know, when a student is holding something, you're making those connections to the eye, to the nerves, and you're creating
Right.
an
mm,
experience. It's that, and like we were talking, you know, how the brain works, you're creating an experience. And Kim Murphy, who is amazing, she's from Texas also as well, said one thing that I always quote now. It's like, you don't have to worry about the wow factor in AR, VR.
Yeah.
That takes care of itself. It already has the wow factor. What we need to do is we need to make that connection and create the experience. So a lot of times, like I said, many people see it as that's a gimmick, it costs too much money. You know, the students don't
Yeah.
understand. We're so quick to just say and dismiss things. It's like, let's give it a shot. Let's try it out. If it
mm,
works, great. If it doesn't, okay, well, let's tweak it. Is it me that maybe did something wrong? Is it the experience? And you know, but slowly we need to start looking into those future technologies that are going to be coming. You know, whether we like it or not, they are already here. The future of work. I mean, you've got people that are using headsets to meet. There's no longer a need for offices.
Right.
Classrooms are now implementing AR, VR at the universities, where they have biology labs that the students can just, you know, put on goggles, follow the simulation, and the professor gets to see it in real time. You're not spending any money on flasks. Nobody's blowing
Yeah.
anything up.
Nobody's getting
Everything is
injured.
safe space. And so it's coming. It's coming a lot. It's here, but it's going to be coming into education a lot more, a lot quicker than we think. So we just need to get ready for that, and just start working with our teachers. And that's the whole part of that growth mindset of not being scared of new tech, not being scared of, you know, new practices, new things. It's okay to feel uncomfortable at first, but give it a
Yeah.
shot, you know?
mm.
I think your hour of creativity every day has really affected the way you look at things, or maybe the way you look at things has really affected the other. You know how it goes both ways. Um, Innovation always comes out, you know, kind of trendy or silly or toy, or like I remember the first time I saw something on Quiver Vision.
Hmm.
It was a fire truck that, you know, I held my Chromebook over it, and then the fire truck drove off, and there was water spraying, and my mind was blown. And as a teacher, I thought, oh my gosh, how can I use this? You know, we could is there a way we could draw something and then have it animate like that? And it was just wonderful how when you first see an innovation, it does give you that wow factor, that's for sure. But creative teachers will look at that and say, you know, I could use that in my classroom.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what it is, Karen, like you said, it's just really looking at things through a different lens. You know, like I said, sometimes, you know, our vision as educators, because I think at myself in the very beginning, it was, this is the way things have to be done, because coming in, not going through education, I was just doing what I learned and what teachers were modeling for me. So,
Right.
okay, this is the way things need to be done. But then say, well, it's not working. It can work for them because maybe it's for their classroom, but there's nothing wrong. Like I mentioned earlier, it's like I would take the good from this teacher, the good from this teacher, and this teacher.
Hmm.
And I always use that analogy of the mixing bowl. Just pop it in my mixing bowl and mix it and make it my own, and how it's going to work for my classroom. So, even with that, that's part of the creative process, and just being able to see things through a different lens also really helps as well,
Hmm.
and again, it's nothing against teachers at all whatsoever, because it's always curriculum, curriculum. So it's your laser focused on making sure that you start this day in August or September, and by the time the state test comes, you had to have already been finished with this. So you're hyper focused, you're laser focused on that, and so when something like this comes, it kind of like, no, I can't have anything disrupt my vision. I'm just straightforward. But if you just take some time and just look around and see and say, hey, you know what? This fits in with this fits in with this fits in with this. And I'm targeting all of these things, maybe just with one app, one AR experience you create. I mean, that's a win right there. And this, excuse me, and the students will remember that content.
That's right. Absolutely.
I have a final question.
Sure.
What hints and tips could you give to Karen and myself about podcasting?
Okay, hints and tips for podcasting. Actually, I mean, you're doing a fine job. you're
Oh,
you're doing
thanks.
great. I mean, you guys, and see, and here's the thing. And again, I'm gonna go back to people that have helped me. All it was is just click record, period. You know, and just and this is what I love. Like this. Like I said, I it's not often I get to be on this side, but it's just all about a conversation. Just
Mm,
really getting to know people, giving them the time, giving them a platform, because there's so many creatives that are out there and educators that sometimes people don't give them the opportunity to share their passion. And so I think that as podcasters, depending on what you're doing, or the type of podcast, like I do more of a show, it's not so much geared, it's centered around educators, but we touch on education, but it's more knowing the person. So it just depending, your niche. But even then, don't even worry about that. And here's one piece of advice too that I want to give you. Don't worry about numbers. Don't worry about numbers. Please don't worry, because I've seen so many things happen to wonderful people that start podcasts that have this passion and are driven, and all of a sudden they see numbers and they're like, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I feel like I don't belong within this circle. Maybe I feel, don't do that.
mm,
It kind of happened maybe for me like about episode 25, 26, where it was like numbers and numbers and see who's watching. And then after that, I said, you know what? I mean, why do I care? It's like I'm doing, this is my passion project.
mm,
And what I'm
Right.
doing is for me. And if it doesn't, appeal to anybody else, it's
mm,
okay. But I'm doing this for me because it helps me, have contact with people, and how it helps me learn their stories, and it helps me know what they're going through, because I want to feel that, or I want to make them relatable. I want to make us relatable to everybody else, that just because you have a podcast doesn't mean that we're unapproachable.
mm,
So just keep doing what you're doing, be yourselves, and you'll be surprised how fulfilling that is, because as long as you just continue with that passion, it doesn't matter numbers, it doesn't matter anything. At least one day you'll say, I was able to do that, and I did it my way. And whether somebody liked it or not, you know you're good. And always keep in mind that one little thing that somebody may listen to can really have a huge impact. Like you're planting those seeds. Like right now, all of your shows, there have been seeds that have been shared with the world and the listeners. And those seeds someday will definitely bloom, and you're going to be reaping some wonderful fruit from that, because the educator community is going to continue to grow. People are going to, say, hey, can I be on your show? I want to share my story. And
Mm.
and it's amazing, so just keep clicking record, and don't look at numbers, and just continue forward with your passion.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, such wise words. But on that note, Fonz, thank you so much for being on our show. Thank you for sharing your story, the inspiration that drove you to become a teacher, meeting your teachers from previous school years, ninth grade. And I'm sure you're going to meet your students as well. And in a few years, they'll be like, Mr. M, do you remember that lesson?
Yes, I'm excited about that. Like I said, that means so much to me too as well. And of course, always moving forward and growing. So just again, just if I can leave our viewers with just 3 parting words: improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yeah, definitely powerful
Absolutely.
words.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, thank you to all our listeners as well. And don't forget to log in, connect with us on @chatwsk1 on Apple and Anchor.
Mhm. All right. Thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you. Thank you, Fonz.
Thank
Oh, it
you.
was a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye bye.